Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. Let's go ahead and close out this mini series today, shall we? Let's close out this concept of executive negotiations. We've walked through a lot of different pieces. If you've missed any episode, I'm going to encourage you to go back and listen to it. We spent a lot of time really understanding what negotiation is and isn't. We talked about why it matters. We've really come to an alignment or an agreement around the simple fact that being an effective negotiator is the epitome of being an effective executive, that being a negotiator is required for you to have that high-performance executive brand. And we've really identified some of the key skill sets, patterns, behaviors, all of the above that goes with being a master negotiator. And so today, let's tie this thing together. Let's talk about how you become an effective negotiator. So I wanted to do two things really quickly today. Number one, I wanted to bring us back around to why you must be this master negotiator. Let's tackle it one more time, just so you don't step away from it, because again, the fear of not being a good negotiator, right? Once we acknowledge that negotiations are required as an executive, when we acknowledge that the skill set is required, and then we recognize that there's a gap between where we are and where we think we need to be, or where we probably actually do need to be as an executive, right? Because there's always growth. There's always growth. When we find that there's this gap, in the gap is the fear. The fear that I am not going to be an effective executive because I don't know how to negotiate effectively. And so let's go ahead one more time and talk about why executive negotiation is critical and it's a must for your executive brand, right? The first thing is, number one, we must recognize that it is a required skill. We must acknowledge it. We cannot hide from it. We cannot say we'll get to it later. We can't say that I'm just not good at it, so I'm going to avoid it. Being an executive and being a negotiator goes hand in hand. It's a required skill set. If you can't negotiate, chances are you're not going to be an executive for very long. That is the truth. You may not like it, but it is the truth. The other thing we have to do as we move through this process and embrace the fact that we're going to add the art of negotiation to our executive brand is that we've got to remind ourselves of what negotiation is and isn't, right? Being an effective negotiator is about achieving the common goal that the company needs us to achieve in a way that serves the majority of people, right? That allows every team to function at the level that they need to. We're really looking out for the best interest of the whole. It's not about I win, you lose. That's not what we're talking about, right? And so anytime we're in that space of fear and we think about, I'm not really a great negotiator, we have to come back and remember that we get better as we do it, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing we have to remember is that it's not about me winning and you losing. That's more of manipulation and not negotiation. Negotiation is, again, what are we trying to achieve together and what's the best way to get there? And then I'm going to negotiate and work through and compromise until we can come up with an agreement that's best for everyone or for the majority of people. And it really is going to help the company and the customer win, right? We have to constantly remind ourselves what negotiation is and what it isn't, right? We then need to remind ourselves, what does good look like? Let's continue to go back to that. What does good look like? We spent some time writing down the attributes of what a master negotiator, what do they have? What are those attributes of a master negotiator? What does that look like? We've got to go back and look at that. We've got to continue to compare ourselves to that master negotiator. They have given us a blueprint. Let's follow it. And then we've got to practice, practice, practice. If we're going to master anything, we have to practice doing it. And as I told you already, it's not about, I won, they lost, or they won, I lost. It's a compromise. And so we can't lose. And so if we can't lose, then we cannot stay in the space of fear. We simply need to go practice and practice and practice until we become that master negotiator, and we can continue to put forth and display those attributes of what a master negotiator looks like, because when we're a master negotiator, we're a successful executive. And that's what we want. We want that endpoint overarchingly for ourselves, which is to be a successful executive, right? That's where we can focus on what we want, is being a successful executive. In negotiation, it's not about do I win or lose. It's not about how silly did I look or how amazing did I look. It's not about me. It's about coming together to achieve the common endpoint and compromising and finding the best way to get there. And when we, again, remember what negotiation really is, that will help us focus outward, not inward, and we can practice and we can stay out of fear and we can get better at it, okay? Now, what I would tell you is that if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone who's guiding you down the path of effective negotiations, you need to find someone who will. That is 100% what we do here at Legend Leaders. It's part of how we help you build your executive brand. We're happy to support you in that. If you've got someone that's helping you, good. The bottom line and what I care about is that you master this skill, you build this muscle, you add this as part of your brand, period. That's all I care about. I want it in your brand because you know it's a must. It must be in your brand, so let's get it there. How you achieve it is up to you, okay? Now, in the last few minutes, I want to give you 3 key things about how you're going to negotiate. Because you probably listened to this whole thing and you're like, great, Katrina, I kind of understand the high-level concept, but what in the heck do I do? I'm going to give you 3 pieces, 3 things to remind you about a negotiation. Number 1, know your outcome, right? I constantly have said this to you every single week. We're under the understanding that we all want to achieve a common outcome when we sit into that room as executives, or we sit into the room and you're leading your team and you're trying to come up with a strategy or the agreement on how to get to the endpoint. Well, we've already agreed on what the endpoint must be. So before you go into a negotiation, what is your outcome? What are you trying to achieve? What must happen? Be extremely clear. It's one of the biggest failures that I see in any negotiation is someone just walks in and they're not super clear on what they actually want to achieve. What is the real endpoint here? Get super clear on that. The other thing that you've got to understand and you've got to do before you walk in that room is you've got to outline what you're willing to concede and what you're willing to give up and what you will not give up at any cost, right? Maybe you're going to have to go in and you're going to talk about reallocation of headcount because we've got to get to an endpoint. It's going to take hands and labor and people and smarts and skill sets. And we've got this talent pool of people. And let's say the bulk of the individuals actually report to you, and you've got to come up with a way to share some of that talent for a period of time in a way that still allows your team to get done what your team's responsible for, right? And that happens all the time. Before you walk into that room, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to compromise and move around? And what is a must for you that must stay? Is there one person? Are there 2 people that are critical to the function of your team in this example that you will not give up? That is not a negotiating point. It is off the table. It is not an option. You've got to be clear about that. And then number 3, what I want you to realize is that in negotiations, don't give up too soon. I've seen time and time again where people will walk into the room. They've done number 1, they know their outcome. They've done number 2, they know what they're willing to give up versus not. They walk in, and you got to remember, the person who makes the offer first, puts out the first offer, actually has given up a little bit of their power first. I hate the word power. It's the easiest way to describe it. But when we're negotiating, essentially the person who makes the first offer, right, really throws out a little bit. They show their cards a little bit if we're playing a card game. Because now the other people know what they're willing to work with and they can negotiate. And usually the person who throws out the offer first doesn't always get everything that they want. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you hold all the cards and you need to throw out the offer first. That's fine. But what I want you to understand is in this example of don't give up too soon, let's go back to that. That person who throws out an offer, maybe, you're willing to give up 5 people and that person says, you know what? I really just need 2 people. And you're like, okay. Well, what if they really didn't need 2 people? What if they really only needed 1 person? And you did all the work, you knew that, but because they didn't go after 5 and you were willing to give up 5 if you had to, they only asked for 2, so you're like, oh, that's fine. Well, keep negotiating. Maybe they really don't need 2. They're just trying to get you to give them something and they only need 1 and you can still keep 4. Because you're going to need 4 because your piece of responsibility is much bigger than theirs. And you actually have damaged your ability to get where you need to go. Think about that, okay? Know your outcome and what must happen. Outline what you're willing to concede versus not. Don't give up too soon in the negotiation just because You didn't have to sacrifice everything right out of the gate. Continue to have those discussions. All right? Those are the key components that I would tell you as you enter into a negotiation. I also want you to remember that there are times that you're going to have to go ahead and make the first offer. There are times that you may not need to give up the first offer. I would be thinking about, as you're playing these dynamics in your brain, do you have more to lose? Does someone else have more to give? If you have more to give, you're probably going to have to give out that first offer. It just depends on who you're negotiating with and how you show up in the room. Don't be afraid to make the first offer. Just simply go in, use your emotional intelligence, get the lay of the land, understand who you're talking to, have some basic dialogue, build some rapport, understand what needs to happen, and then go from there. Every negotiation is going to be a little bit different. If you want more negotiation tips, if you want to make sure this is a solid piece of your brand, please schedule a free 30-minute executive brand assessment with us. We'd love to help you with that. That's exactly what we're here for. Again, it's 100% free, so don't miss out on this process. And if you haven't grabbed your free workbook to help you with this new concept, this concept of executive negotiations and building this muscle, please get the workbook, right? Again, free resources. Don't pass them up. Free doesn't mean it's crap. Free just means that we're trying to give you something because we believe in you and we very much want you to succeed. Two totally different things. All right? As always, go and be legendary.